Speaker, the living standards of nearly 50,000 pensioners in Malvern Hills District and Wychavon District are going to be deteriorating very sharply this winter in the front of 10% increase in their energy bills and no winter fuel allowance. Many of these pensioners have incomes just above the pension credit threshold, and many of them, of course, are too frail and too old to work. And yet, within the first few days of coming to office, the Chancellor managed to spend over £22 billion very quickly by setting up Great British Energy, by setting up a national wealth fund, and by giving in to the pay demands of her party's union paymasters. Is it not the case that this Chancellor has made the chilling political choice to balance the books of this country on the very frailest shoulders?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I'm disappointed that the honourable member is talking down essential investments in our country's future that we've made, and that she also seems to be confused that there is a £22 billion black hole because of the unfunded spending commitments made by the party opposite when they were in government. But she makes an important point about protecting pensioners, and that is why it is so important to ensure that all of those pensioners who are eligible for pension credit take up pension credit, and I would look forward to her support in making sure they do so.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I welcome the Chancellor to her place? Notwithstanding what she's just said there, can the Chancellor tell the House why she has made the political decision to scrap the commitment to at least 2.5% of GDP on defence spending, undermining our support for Ukraine, and instead prioritised giving her union paymasters inflation-busting pay rises that have only led to more unions calling for more strikes and more pay?
Let me respond directly on the issue of Ukraine. I had the pleasure to meet Minister Marchenko from Ukraine in my first couple of weeks in this job and made the commitment to him to go ahead with the extraordinary revenue acceleration programme. I think this is an area that it's important that across the House we work together to support the Ukrainian people against the Russian invasion. In the last Parliament, we always supported the government when they took action to support the Ukrainian people. I hope that cross-party support can continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's estimated the Bank of England will require a further £110 billion of taxpayer subsidy to cover long bond sale losses through to 2030. So why is the Chancellor clobbering pensioners to save £1.5 billion a year when she could be challenging the Bank of England to save tens of billions of pounds a year?
Well, before I became a Member of Parliament, I was an economist at the Bank of England, and I respect the independence of the Bank of England. The previous government undermined that independence. That contributed to the economic chaos we saw under the last Conservative government. This government will never go down that route.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When the Chancellor was sitting on this side of the House, she repeatedly attacked cronyism. So can she tell the House whether she told the Treasury Permanent Secretary that Ian Caulfield had made a donation to her before she got him appointed as a director in the Treasury? Yes or no? Yes.
All governments appoint people to the civil service. The donation from Ian Caulfield was declared over a year ago in the proper way, and we answered all the questions in the right way that the civil service asked when we made that appointment. Ian Caulfield is supporting this government in hosting the International Investment Summit, which is going to bring hundreds of global investors to the UK next month.
I think that means the answer is no. And the Ministerial Code states that ministers must ensure that no conflict arises or could reasonably be perceived to arise between their public duties and their private interests, financial or otherwise. That did not happen. So will she tell the House why is cronyism wrong under the Conservatives but acceptable under Labour?
I think they've got a bit of brass neck criticising this government after the appointments and the partying at Downing Street that we saw under the last Conservative government, and billions of pounds of contracts handed out to friends and donors of the Conservative Party. That's why this government are appointing a COVID corruption commissioner to get that money back from taxpayers, because unlike the last government, we are determined that taxpayers' money is treated with respect and not handed out to donors of the party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In July, borrowing stood at £3.1 billion, well ahead of the OBR's forecast of £0.1 billion. Does the Chancellor agree that she could have actually reduced the level of the national debt had she chosen not to reward her trade union paymasters by spending £10 billion in inflation-busting pay rises?
Yeah. Well, as the honourable gentleman knows, the government borrowing is running at £4.7 billion higher than the OBR forecast because the previous government made unfunded commitments without any idea of how they were going to be paid for. The previous government set the mandate for the independent pay review bodies, and we have honoured the recommendations of the independent pay review bodies to ensure that our armed forces, our police officers, and our nurses and our teachers got a pay rise. I think that is the right thing to do. If he doesn't, I don't wonder how he justifies that to public sector workers in his constituency.